Sourdough white bread with lievito madre.
Hi. Now I'm going to knead a white bread that I make with pasta madre. I kneaded from half a kilogram of high-protein bread flour, for which I previously sifted the flour. I measure 350 grams of water into the mixing bowl, which will be needed for the 500 grams of flour. I don't recommend more water for beginners. I got 370 grams of water, but the madre is hard yeast and will require more water, so you have to constantly monitor the dough while kneading. If necessary, I will add more. I also put the flour in the mixing bowl. Now I'm going to add the yeast. For 500 grams of flour, 100 to 110 grams of sourdough will be enough. I always add 20% yeast to the flour. So if you need from 600 grams of flour, you have to mix the flour with 120 grams of yeast and water. It is not worth using more sourdough, because it can also make the finished dough wet. Now I mix the flour, water, and yeast. Machine mixing for about 2 to 3 minutes. Then I let this mixture rest for 30 to 40 minutes so that flour grains absorb water. In 2 minutes, the machine mixed the flour, water, and yeast. The dough is now uniform. I stop the machine and let the dough rest for 40 minutes.
About 40 minutes later, you can start kneading.
40 minutes have passed. I start kneading on low speed. In this case, you will be able to see what the texture of the dough is like. You probably need to add more water. I will definitely add water for the sake of the madre. In this case, you can even add a little water. After kneading for 3 to 4 minutes, I usually add the salt, and after that, I usually knead until done. No need to over-knead, 8 to 10 minutes will be enough. Halfway through the kneading, I add the salt. I add 13 grams of salt because madre sourdough can handle more salt. While I knead until ready in another 1 to 2 minutes, I oil a bowl in which I will leaven the dough. Many people have contacted me on Facebook, Messenger, and email to ask why the bread is not good, what you are doing wrong, why it is wet. I always say that after you have kneaded the dough and put it in a bowl, always mark the side of the yeast bowl. In general, the ripening time of the bulk and the dough is 5 hours. It also depends on how hot you keep the dough. 5 to 6 hours, even 7 hours. If you mark the side of the bowl when you put the dough in, measure it, and I'll show you that I start shaping at 80% volume increase. It takes time for the dough to ripen. If you start shaping the dough earlier, it will be rough, it will be heavy, it will not be so loose and light. Many of you also asked what makes the dough so airy. Even though everyone says that it's not important to fold, our grandmothers didn't fold it either. It's important to fold it, because the foldings bring in the air, and that's what makes the dough bubble, and that gives the dough its structure. It is important to fold. Of course, if we don't get it right, 1 to 2 folds will be left out, and the bread will be the same. Either way, it will be delicious, but if you want a nice dough, wait for the leavening time, fold it, and the bread will be good for sure. I kneaded the dough. I'll collect it. I'm used to beating the dough on the edge of the bowl, but you can also beat it on the counter. Then I transfer it to the bowl. I drive it with a pedal drive. I had to add water to the pasta. Therefore, instead of the original 70%, it has become 80% hydrated for me. The dough became a little softer, but that's okay, it will gather itself during the folding. I got down the folds. Very good. Now I turn it over and move it around the bowl a bit. I put the top of the bowl on it, and mark where the dough starts. This is where the dough starts. I also write when I started. If the increase in volume has almost doubled, then the dough is ready to be shaped. I covered it and let it rest for about 45 minutes. I will laminate it in 45 minutes. This will also introduce more air into the dough. This also makes the dough more airy, so I continue after 45 minutes.
About 45 minutes later, you can start laminating.
About 45 minutes later. 45 minutes have passed. I'm laminating the dough now. Wet the counter. If you don't have the opportunity to fold the dough on the counter, feel free to fold the dough in the bowl. Either with pedal folding, if the dough is not very hydrated, or with coil folding, if the dough is more moist. I'm laminating now. I spread it out on the counter. I roll out the dough with wet hands. Pretty thin. Here you can already see that it is full of bubbles. When I'm done, I fold in half. Fold the other half over. And roll up. After I roll it up, I put it back in the bowl and let it rest for at least 50 minutes. When the dough is completely smooth, the next fold comes.
About 1 hour later, the first fold.
1 hour has passed. I roll the dough. Here now, you can see the leaven working. With wet hands, I reach under both sides, pull up the dough, put it down. I turn the bowl over and repeat. I turn the bowl over again, repeat. All 4 sides must be moved a little. I cover it and rest for another 50 to 60 minutes.
About 50 minutes later, the second folding.
Another 50 minutes passed. I look at the dough and fold it. Now you can see that it has started to grow. It's full of bubbles. I reach under the dough in the middle, pull it up and fold it under itself. I turn the bowl. Fold it from all sides. I cover it, let it rest for another 50 to 60 minutes, then come back and do the last folding.
About 50 minutes later, the third folding.
The third fold follows. You should always fold it when the top is completely smooth. Another drive may follow. I reach under the dough in the middle, pull the dough up. Once again, turn it over on the plate. And now you can see that it has grown a lot. Now the dough takes 4 hours. The texture is very good. He has grown so much. Now I'm waiting for an hour. It will be exactly 5 hours of proofing when I shape it. Until then, I cover it and keep it in a warm place.
After about 1 hour, pre-shaping the dough.
Now comes the pre-shaping. That's how much the dough grew. So, it almost doubled. So now it's time to style it. Pre-shaping is not used by everyone. I'm used to it, I like it, I think it makes the dough firmer. I lightly flour the counter. I roll out the dough. I pre-shaping, this is how I usually pre-shape. Around, like when we use pre-towel drive. I'll make it through. I'll turn it over. I'll round it up a bit. When it's done, I put it aside. I flour it very little. I will cover it and let it rest for 15 to 20 minutes. The pasta is nice. I need to rest it so that I can shape it more easily afterwards.
About 15 to 20 minutes later, shaping.
The dough rested a bit. I shape it. I shape it into a loaf. I'll turn it over. I adjust it to a square shape. I used to pop the bigger bubbles with a toothpick. I fold up the bottom of the dough. I take the two ends, pull them a little, and fold them crosswise. I hold the top of the ear, fold it over, and pull the dough a little at the two ends, like when swaddling a baby, and pinch it together. I tighten it. When I get to the end, I grab the end, fold it up, and push it down on the counter, pulling it towards me, and tighten it. This is how I get the small shape. I close up both ends. I will still pop these larger bubbles. This is how the dough turned out. I will flour it a little. I lined a banneton basket with a tea towel. It's not important if you sprinkle it with rice flour, that's enough, it won't stick, but I lined it now. I put the dough in the banneton basket with the seam facing up. I'm still pinching it here, tightening it. I'll seal the ends. I will flour it a little. It will rise when this banneton basket is filled with dough, all the way to its edge and length. That's how I'll know he's up. The seams start to disappear. If you leave it on the counter, it requires at least 2 to 3 hours of leaving. You can check with a finger test whether the dough has risen by pressing the dough with your floured finger. If the dough remains like this, it means that it is already overcooked. If the dough kicks back quickly, it is not yet risen. If you press it and your finger stays inside, the dough slowly rises back up, then it's good, then it should be baked. I now dress this dough well and leave it on the counter for an hour. Then I put it in the fridge for 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to bake this today, but if it's in the fridge for a while, it will be easier to cut into the dough, and the dough will hold better. I will continue later.
After 5 hours of refrigeration, bake it.
I will bake the bread. I had it in the fridge for 5 hours now, which makes it easier for me to be able to prune and possibly decorate. I preheated the oven to 250 degrees Celsius 482 degrees Fahrenheit, bottom up. I also put the pot in which I will bake. I brush off the rice flour a little. I flour it a little with simple bread flour so that I can decorate it. I used to smooth this flour by hand. I wipe off the excess. A little simple decoration is added. These are not very deep cuts, about 2 to 3 millimeters deep. These are small surface cuts. The main incision will be a little deeper. With a decisive movement, I cut it. I'll bring the dish over here. I put the bread in quickly. I will put the lid on it and bake it at 250 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, I remove the lid, ventilate the pot, and bake the bread. 20 minutes have passed, let's look at the bread. It's half time. I now reduce the temperature to 210 degrees Celsius 410 degrees Fahrenheit. I lift the lid and ventilate the steam a little. I turn it over so that what was inside until now is outside. I put the lid back on for another 10 minutes, but only at 210 degrees Celsius 410 degrees Fahrenheit. This is how I will cook it.
After 45 minutes of baking, take out the bread.
The bread has been baking for 45 minutes. Let's look at. This is good now. I think it turned out very nice. Try it. Do it with me, everyone will succeed based on the video. If you have any questions, ask them here on YouTube, I'll try to answer them during the video.
Let's see what we baked.
Let's cut the bread. Came out good. If you like the video, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Visit my website www.kovazimorja.hu. Thank you for watching the video, bye. Ingredients: 500 grams of bread flour, 350 grams of water, 100 to 110 grams of pasta madre, 13 grams of salt.